Welcome to another episode of HR Game Changers. We're diving into the return to office dilemma today. I'm Dave, and with me is Louisa, our expert, to help us figure this whole thing out. We're going to be looking at some insights from Brett Beauchamp-Russell. His recent article should help everyone listening get a better handle on all this, whether you're an employee or a leader.
Yeah, it's a really hot topic right now. It seems like the pandemic flipped the whole idea of work on its head, and now everyone's trying to predict what the future holds.
Exactly. And one of the biggest things we've seen is this rise of hybrid work. Beauchamp-Russell says that a lot of companies, 58% actually think this whole hybrid thing is here to stay. But what do you think? Is it just a fad? Or are there bigger reasons for this?
I think the research shows it's more than just a passing trend. This move toward hybrid work is happening because what employees expect is changing. Flexibility and work-life balance are at the top of the list now, and companies are realizing they have to change too. If they want to keep their good people and attract new talent, there's a study from Cornell University that found some workers would actually rather have flexibility than earn more money. That's a pretty big change in how people see work.
That's a really interesting point. So it's not just about the money anymore. It's about having some control over your time and how work fits into your life. But this definitely creates a whole new set of challenges for people in HR, right? How do you balance what the organization needs with these new expectations everyone has?
Oh, for sure. It's like walking a tightrope. Beauchamp-Russell's article talks about the tension between employees wanting flexibility and the fact that organizations still need people to show up in person sometimes. It's not about choosing one or the other. It's about finding a way to use the good parts of both.
So let's dig into that a bit. What are the big advantages of working in person? And then what's so great about working remotely?
Well, in-person work definitely has its strengths. Things like collaborating on the fly, building stronger relationships with your team, and even just those chance moments of creativity that are harder to get when everyone's online. There's just an energy, being in the same room, sharing ideas back and forth, feeding off each other's energy.
Yeah, I get that. There's just something about being there in person that can really spark new ideas and a sense of purpose. But I can also see why remote work has its own advantages.
Oh, absolutely. Remote work gives employees more control over their schedule and where they work, and that can lead to people being more productive and happier. Plus, no commute, which saves a lot of time and stress, and can really help with work-life balance.
It sounds like there are good arguments for both sides. So how do we move past this idea of picking one or the other? How do we find solutions that actually work for everyone?
I think that's where using data comes in. Instead of relying on assumptions, organizations need to start using workplace analytics to really understand what works best for their teams and roles.
Using data sounds good, but what does that actually look like? Can you give us some examples?
Sure. You can use data to see how often people come into the office, which departments really seem to benefit from face-to-face interaction. You can even see how productivity changes based on where people are working. By looking at this data, you can start to see patterns and make better decisions about which teams do better in person and which are just as productive or even more so when they work remotely.
So it's about using data to make smarter decisions about your return to office policies, instead of just doing a one-size-fits-all thing.
Exactly. And that's something the People Scout report talks about too. They make it clear there's no magic solution. The key is understanding the specifics of different roles and then coming up with solutions that address those needs.
That makes sense. Like a sales team that works with clients a lot might need to be in the office more, but a software development team might be just as productive or even more so working remotely.
Right. The data can show you those kinds of things, and then companies can create policies that support both what employees want and what the organization needs to achieve.
But even with this customized data-driven approach, there are still potential issues, right? How do you make sure everyone feels included and valued in this kind of hybrid work model? It seems like it would be easy for remote workers to feel left out or disconnected.
That's a really important point, and Beauchamp-Russell addresses that in his article. One of the big worries with hybrid work is the potential for inequality, especially for those who are mostly remote. They might miss out on things like mentorship, have less access to resources for career development, or even just feel less connected to the company culture.
So how do we keep this kind of two-tiered system from happening? What can organizations do to make sure everyone feels valued and supported, no matter where they're working?
Well, the first step is recognizing that this is a real problem and that it needs proactive solutions. Leaders need to be intentional about building a culture that includes everyone, even those who aren't physically in the office.
Okay, so what does that actually look like? Can you give us some specific examples?
Sure. One thing is making sure remote workers have equal access to training and resources for career development. Just because they're not there in person doesn't mean they should miss out on opportunities to grow. It's also really important to make sure everyone has access to key decisions, project updates, and important information, no matter where they are.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about making people feel like they belong and that they're in the loop.
Right. And it's not just about formal communication. Think about virtual team building activities, regular check-ins, and even just making an effort to acknowledge and celebrate the achievements of remote employees, just as you would for those in the office. It's about making everyone feel seen and appreciated.
It seems like open communication is really key for hybrid work to be successful. But how do you make sure it's a two-way street? How do you get honest feedback from employees about what's working and what's not?
I think regular pulse surveys can be really helpful for that. They let companies get real-time feedback from employees about their experience with the hybrid model and identify any problems or areas that need improvement so they can adjust their approach.
So it's about creating a loop of feedback, listening to your employees,
Yeah.
and being ready to adapt as you go.
Yeah, exactly. Because the world of work is constantly changing. What works today might not work tomorrow.
We've covered a lot of ground here. The rise of hybrid work, the challenge of balancing what organizations need with what employees want, the importance of using data, and the need for inclusivity and open communication. What are some key things we should remember as we try to figure out this new way of working?
I think one of the most important takeaways is that the world of work has fundamentally changed. That old way of everyone working in the office 5 days a week, it's not the only option anymore. And for a lot of people, it's not even the best option. We need to embrace this change and find ways to make hybrid work successful for both organizations and employees.
It's about recognizing that hybrid work, when it's done right, can be a win-win for everyone. It can make people more productive, make employees happier, and create a more engaged workforce overall.
Absolutely. But it takes a thoughtful and strategic approach. It's not just about letting people work from home whenever they want. It's about using data to understand what works best, creating a culture where everyone feels included, and making sure communication is open and honest so that everyone is on the same page.
So it's about being flexible, but doing it in a way that's intentional, strategic. And based on data, we're going to dive deeper into some of the more detailed parts of creating a successful hybrid work environment. After a quick break, stick with us.
So we've talked about how hybrid work is probably here to stay and that it has some good benefits for companies and their employees. But how do we actually make it work? How do we move from just talking about it to actually doing it?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's easy to say, let's do hybrid work, but it's a lot harder to actually set it up in a way that works for everyone.
You're right. And there's no one right way to do it. Every organization is different. They have their own culture needs and challenges. What works for one company might not work for another.
So where do you even start? What are the first things companies should do when they're planning their hybrid models?
Well, before you get lost in all the details, you really need to figure out why you're doing this. What are you hoping to achieve with hybrid work? Is it about finding and keeping good employees, making people more productive, making employees happier, or maybe all of the above?
I guess having a clear reason for doing it will help you make all the other decisions.
Exactly. It's like building a house. You wouldn't start building without a plan, would you?
Yeah.
It's the same with hybrid work. You need to know what you're trying to build and why.
Okay, so you've figured out your why. What's next?
Next, you need to talk to the people who will be using this house you're building, your employees. Getting their input is really important. Do surveys hold focus groups or have one-on-one conversations to understand what they need, what they prefer, and what they're worried about? What kind of flexibility are they looking for? What challenges do they see? What would make them feel supported in this new way of working?
Getting that feedback. Make sure the model is actually what your employees need, and it helps them feel like they're part of the process.
Right. It's about creating something that works for everyone, not just management.
So we have the why, and we talk to our employees. Now it's time for the details, right? How do we actually make this work day to day?
This is where it can get a little tricky. You have to set clear guidelines and expectations about things like when people need to be in the office, how they'll communicate with each other, and what tools and support will be available for people working remotely.
This is where things could get confusing and frustrating, right? If those expectations aren't clear, or if you don't have the right systems in place, it could cause more problems than it solves.
Absolutely. Communicating clearly and consistently is super important. And it's not just about sending out one email. It's about having ongoing conversations, providing updates regularly, and being open to feedback and making changes as needed.
So you need to think of hybrid work as something that's always evolving, not just a set of fixed rules.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
It takes ongoing attention, flexibility, and willingness to adapt. What your employees need might change, the business might have new demands, and there might be new technologies. The key is to be responsive and make adjustments.
Speaking of technology, that seems like a big part of making this work. What kind of technology do companies need to support a hybrid workforce?
That's a really important point. Technology is critical for hybrid work to be successful. You need good video conferencing software for smooth virtual meetings, project management platforms so teams can work together no matter where they are, and secure access to company data for those working remotely.
And it's not just about having the technology, it's about making sure people are comfortable using it and that it fits into their workflow. Nobody wants to struggle with a complicated system or have trouble staying connected.
Exactly. You want technology to help people be more productive and collaborate better, not slow them down. So it's worth investing in training and support to make sure everyone knows how to use it effectively.
So we've covered purpose, employee input, logistics, communication, and technology. What about company culture? How do we keep that strong when people aren't always together in the same space? It seems like it would be hard to maintain that sense of camaraderie in a hybrid environment.
A lot of companies worry about that, and it's a valid concern. Building a strong culture when you have a hybrid workforce requires being more deliberate. You can't just rely on those random conversations in the hallway or quick team lunches to build connections. You need to create those opportunities, both online and in person.
So what are some things companies can do to build a strong culture in this kind of environment?
One thing is to schedule regular virtual coffee breaks or social hours where teams can just relax and chat. You could also have online team building activities or challenges that encourage people to interact and work together. And when you can try to arrange in-person meetups for teams that are close enough geographically.
Having a mix of virtual and in-person events seems like a good way to accommodate different preferences and needs.
Exactly. And remember, building a strong culture in a hybrid setting takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes ongoing effort, creative thinking, and a willingness to try different things to see what works best for your team.
It's about being flexible
Yeah.
and learning as you go.
Exactly. And a strong culture isn't just about having fun together, although that's definitely part of it. It's about creating a sense of belonging, building trust and respect among team members, and making sure everyone feels valued and appreciated for what they do.
It's about creating a sense of community, even when people aren't in the same place.
Exactly. And when you can do that, you're on the right track to creating a really successful hybrid work environment.
We've covered a lot: purpose, employee feedback, logistics, communication, technology, and culture. What else should we think about when it comes to hybrid work?
One thing that often gets overlooked is setting clear boundaries between work and personal life. This can be especially hard in a hybrid environment where it's easy for those lines to get blurred.
Yeah, that's true. When your home is also your office, it can be tempting to check emails all the time or work late into the night. But that lack of separation can lead to burnout.
That's right. It's important to encourage employees to set boundaries for their own well-being and to be more productive. This might mean having set work hours, having a dedicated workspace if possible, and making a real effort to disconnect from work at the end of the day.
So it's about making a clear distinction between work time and personal time, even when you're in the same place.
Yes. And it's about respecting those boundaries, your own and your colleagues. Try to avoid sending late-night emails or scheduling meetings outside of work hours, unless it's really necessary.
Clear boundaries are really important. What else should we talk about?
Performance management is another important thing to consider. How do you measure and evaluate how people are doing in a hybrid work setup? The traditional ways of doing things, like looking at how many hours someone spends in the office, might not be as relevant or effective anymore, especially when you have some people working remotely and others in the office.
That's true. You need to find new ways to measure people's contributions and achievements
Yeah.
that are fair and equitable, regardless of where they're working.
You're right. It might mean shifting the focus from hours worked to results achieved. Or maybe developing new metrics that specifically measure things like collaboration, communication, and problem-solving skills.
So it's about finding ways to assess performance that make sense for hybrid work. and that accurately reflect what each person brings to the table.
Exactly. And remember, performance management should be an ongoing conversation, not just a once-a-year thing. Regular check-ins, feedback sessions, and open communication are really important to make sure everyone is doing well and feels supported.
But we've talked about boundaries performance management and the importance of building a strong culture. What else is important for making hybrid work successful?
Well, the last thing I want to emphasize is the role of leadership.
Yeah.
Leaders are crucial for hybrid work to succeed. They need to be advocates for this new way of working, setting the example, showing the right behaviors, and creating an environment where everyone feels supported and empowered to do their best.
So being a good leader in a hybrid work environment
Right.
requires different skills than traditional leadership models.
It does. It requires a different way of thinking, a willingness to embrace new ways of working, and a commitment to creating a work environment that is truly inclusive and equitable for everyone.
So what makes a good leader in a hybrid work environment?
Well, first of all, they need to be great communicators. They need to be able to convey information clearly and concisely in a way that everyone understands no matter where they're working. They also need to be good listeners, taking the time to understand their team members' needs and concerns, and getting feedback regularly.
We've talked a lot about communication today.
It's absolutely crucial. Without clear and consistent communication, it's easy for misunderstandings to happen, for people to feel out of the loop, and for the whole system to break down.
Communication is key. What other qualities are important for leaders in this type of setting?
They also need to be trusting and empowering. They need to trust their teams to get the work done, even when they're not in the office. And they need to give their team members the authority to make decisions, take ownership of their work, and use their unique skills and talent.
It sounds like both the leader and the team members need to trust each other.
Yes, that's true. But when that trust is there, it can lead to great things. Teams are more engaged, more motivated, and more dedicated to the success of the organization.
So good communication, trust, and empowerment are essential for hybrid leadership. Is there anything else leaders should keep in mind as they navigate this new way of working?
They also need to be aware of potential bias and inequality in a hybrid environment. It's easy for those who are in the office to have more opportunities, access to information, and even just casual interactions with leaders. Leaders need to be proactive about making sure everyone has an equal chance, regardless of where they work,
So it's about making sure everyone has the same opportunities.
to contribute and advance in their careers.
Right.
And it's about recognizing that what works for one person might not work for another. Flexibility is key. Some people do their best work remotely, while others need more face-to-face interaction. Leaders need to be adaptable and willing to accommodate those individual needs.
So being a good leader in a hybrid work environment is about communication, trust, empowerment, inclusivity, and flexibility. That's a lot to handle.
It is, but it's also a really rewarding way to lead when you create a hybrid work environment where everyone feels valued, supported, and empowered. The results can be incredible.
It seems like we've covered all the major aspects of hybrid work. Is there anything else we should know about making it successful?
Well, there's one more thing I'd like to add, and it might be the most important thing of all: patience.
Patience, that's interesting. Why patience?
Well, because creating a successful hybrid work model isn't something that happens overnight. It takes time. It's a process. You need to be patient, flexible, and willing to learn and adapt as you go. There will be challenges, and there will be times when you need to change your approach.
So it's not about finding the perfect solution right away. It's more about being okay with the process and making changes along the way.
Exactly. It's all about trying things out, seeing what happens, and making things better over time. What works for one team might not work for another, and what works today might need to be adjusted tomorrow. The important thing is to stay flexible, get feedback, and make changes when you need to.
So patience isn't just about waiting for things to get better. It's about actually being involved in making things better.
Exactly. It's about being open to new things, trying new things, and learning from your mistakes.
So for all the HR professionals, business leaders, and employees out there who are dealing with the challenges of hybrid work, what's the most important thing we can tell them today?
I think the most important thing to remember is you're not alone in this. We're all figuring this out together. There's no one right answer, no magic formula for success. The key is to stay informed, stay connected, and be adaptable.
It's about being open to the changes and challenges, but also the opportunities that come with this new way of working.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that work isn't just about getting things done and making money. It's about people. It's about creating workplaces where people feel valued, respected, and empowered to do their best.
It's about finding that sweet spot between what the organization needs
Hmm.
and the well-being of its people.
That's it. When we can find that balance, we can create a future of work that is both productive and fulfilling.
A big thank you to Brett Bootchamp Russell for his insightful article. It's been a great starting point for our conversation today. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the return to office dilemma. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and practical strategies to help you navigate this ever-changing world of work. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning your mark.